your name if you're interested. Well, I'm sure everyone's interested in doing the library tour, but if you have time to do it at the end of this session. So next up we have Anne O'Byrne. Anne is the head librarian at the Rotunda Hospital and chair of the Rotunda 1916 Commemoration Committee. Anne has her degree in Information and Library Studies, and she also holds an MSc in Health Information Management. And as a professional librarian, she is committed to the equal provision of information services to all categories of users. She sees the role of librarian as being in partnership with lecturer, teacher and students in advancing learning and knowledge. Great. So the Rotunda, the Birth of a Nation, held in honour of the 1916 centenary celebrations, was organised by Anne, and she's going to talk to us about that. Over to you, Anne. It's just this one here.
I'm just going to use it first screen. I'm going to change it again. Thank you, Stephanie. Afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be back in Limerick. I'm a Tipperary person originally, so we're quite near home, and I'm feeling very much at home again. And thank you to your section for inviting me or allowing me to speak to you about our exhibition. As you know, and you've been told, I'm a librarian in the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin. And for those of you who don't know, the Rotunda is the oldest maternity hospital in Europe, and we're situated right at the top of O'Connell Street in inner city Dublin, and we will be there for maybe 5 years more. But we have been there since our founder, Bartholomew Moss, founded the Rotunda. So we have a history of continual care for mothers and babies of Dublin and inner city since 1757. What I want to talk to you about today, and I could talk about Bartholomew Moss, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. But what I want to talk to you about is our exhibition, which was part of the 1916 centenary in Dublin. And I don't think there's a sinner alive that didn't hear of 1916 in all of Ireland in the last while, and particularly Dublin, because it was very successful commemoration. So, where did it start? Yeah, that's where I think so, yeah. Where did it start for us? Well, sorry, that isn't. Sorry, this is not going on full screen. Sorry, folks, the eyes don't do the small screen. The rest of me may, but the eyes don't. That's perfect, lovely. Thank you very much.
If it's all right with you, we'll go with this version of it for now.
So this is really a personal experience of running project work with the team for this centenary exhibition. And it, as I say, it started as a commemoration of the 1916 celebrations in Dublin. From the outset, we were clear in the Rotunda, I suppose, that it wasn't going to be a nationalistic exhibition. We had quite a nationalistic exhibition on our doorstep at the time, which we knew was going to go ahead. So we're actually doing what was the exhibition supposed to achieve? And in doing so, we identified 5 key women, medical women, who had a direct connection with the Rotunda, who had a direct connection because of their activities with 1916 and the Rising, but also provided care during a time of turmoil and great uncertainty in the centre of Dublin. It was very much embryonic. You know medical people, and you're lucky to have 3 minutes conversation in the hallway on a busy day. But this particular individual was more interested in having more than 5-minute conversation with me, and that was Dr. Pat Thornton, our anaesthesist. His family had an understanding about Bridget Lyons Thornton, one of our first ladies, and he came to me with the embryonic idea of researching her and other women in the Rotunda. I'd love to tell you that I was highly enthusiastic to begin with, but heading for June and exams and a busy student workforce, I probably was less than enthusiastic. But we did consider that 1916 was going to take place anyway, devoid of us, with us, because of us. It actually didn't matter. So we did some preparatory work, my colleague and I, during the summer. And the Rotunda has most of its archives in the National Archives. So it was a question of us working off-site for a couple of weeks. And that was to get background, not just to women working in the Rotunda even though it became that long term, but to actually see, you know, where the Rotunda was involved in 1916 as an activity. From there, that August and into September, my CEO gave me the chalice, poisoned or otherwise, of becoming chair of a working group. And this working group was formed of a multidisciplinary group, not just myself and Dr. Thornton, but also you can see the representation from managers, allied health personnel, and others. We also had the input from an external consultant who was interested in contributing to the process and had his own project as a sideline. So he came to us independently with his own agenda. We also required a historian. One of the first things that I said to Dr. Thornton was, I am not an archivist, I am not a historian. I don't intend to become one. I'm a librarian, but I will work with an archivist or a historian. So we made contact with Sinead McCool, and Sinead McCool is an author, as you know, and she has published widely on the women of the Rising, and she agreed to become what is called our curatorial advisor and lender. Okay? And that effectively meant that she would work with me as the intermediary, and I would work with the working group as to the content. So that's how it started. There's a photo as in the library. There's one deficit with it. They're all about 6'2", and I'm not. But thank God for our financial controller, who happens to be near my height. But apart from that, it is representative of the people who some of the people that worked with me. So again, from the outset, there were 2 submissions to our board in October 2015. The submission from Dr. Chris Fitzpatrick, which was quite an extensive portfolio, and then our submission in relation to the women of the Rising. And from that, the board came back with recommendations and changes, and we amalgamated the 2 submissions. Some of it wasn't feasible from a point of view. Money dictates everything at times, but it just wasn't feasible to do one without the other, so we did amalgamate them. And then the decision came to the committee of who we'd work with as partners in developing the exhibition. Don't forget, we only had one woman at this stage, and this was Bridget Lyons Thornton, however formidable. And we've learned a lot about her during the exhibition as well as after. So these are the main service providers. Partners, I prefer to call them, because we worked very, very closely with them in a very short time frame. Don't forget, this was October, and we were talking about March. So I was fortunate in that I had worked with Vermilion Design before. We had a centenary exhibition in the front hall of the Rotunda in 2012, and that still exists. That was the first exhibition I was involved in. And we also have an instrument exhibition that I worked with them also. So I had a natural partner there and was very happy to work with them again. The illumination was by far our last partner, because we didn't know we'd have money to do anything at that point. What I say to you from an experience level is that the single most important thing that you can spend money on outside of design of the exhibition is in marketing and consultation. Our PR consultants were Purcell Masterson, and they're from Kilkenny, but they were invaluable to us in getting the right contracts, dealing with the right people, protecting us every step of the way in the marketing process. And I can't tell you how valuable that was. The curatorial advice, even though she was the national curator for the 1916 exhibition right throughout Ireland, she still gave as much of her time to me by email, by general communication, by phone, and I visited her wherever she was in Dublin to liaise with her. Our own printers, Master Photo, we had worked very successfully with in all our library marketing, our delivery newsletter, our trimester newsletter, and in the branding that you can see on the exhibition. The banner is important because one of our other speakers said it already, you have to have a common theme, a common look, so that people acknowledge what they're looking at and what they're seeing. So the banner was a combination of our own logos from our branding exercise some years ago, the development of the title for the exhibition. And all of the members of the working group and our user groups in the Rotunda were invited to make a suggestion as to what the exhibition should be called. And following a doodle poll, this was the outright winner. So Rotunda Birth of a Nation had its birth. And from the outset, we used that all the time in every communication. In our references to it, we never referred to it as just an exhibition. It was always Rotunda Birth of a Nation. It still is. And I say there we are again, reviewing some material. And we had a whole variety of different types of material that we were going to cover because the research brought us into different areas. So our own photographic archive was used, and we started to look at that point from collections that we might use and borrow from. Our intention was fine wall hangings. They were freestanding like this in the end, and you'll see before we finish presentation today that they were quite effective. But it was important that the representation of the histories were readable, visually pleasant, and that the general public wouldn't find them too heavy, really. So there was a max of 250 words to each of the panels. So these are our women. Bridget Lyons Thornton, as I say, Bridget Lyons worked in the Rotunda up to her retirement. She was a medic, a paediatrician, and she was supposed to be, folks, the first librarian of the Rotunda. Now be warned, there'll be a lot of histories, and we have about 4, but the librarian doesn't appear in any of them. So you can't afford to get too personal about these things. But Bridget Lyons Thornton was accredited with having the first reading room in the Rotunda and in tutoring students as well. Kathleen Lynn, you'll know. I'm not going to go through it because we have a user guide, and I brought some copies if you want them today. Kathleen, as you know, was a soldier and a belligerent. That's the way she described herself. But she also worked as a paediatrician with Dorothy Stopford Price, and she is really responsible for the setting up of St. Ultan's Hospital, which is the first children's hospital. Dorothy Stopford Price again worked with us and Robert Collis as a paediatrician in the Rotunda. During 1916, she was very well known by both sides in the conflict, and she was seen coming out of what they call the district at all hours of the night, noon and morning. So she was providing the first Dove service that now exists from the Rotunda, which is an external service. Albina Broderick was the honorary Albina Broderick, and a very interesting thing happened here. As we started to work with the women, connectors came in that put them together, and that's been said to me by other people who worked with the women in the Rising. But Albina, we found the history of Albina in nursing journals, not in any other source, not in historical sources, but having set up the first INMO, and the INMO were unaware of her. So that was something we were able to share for the first time. Kathleen Lynn, we have the first photograph of Kathleen Lynn during her midwifery training when she was quite a young girl. And traditionally, most of the photos of Kathleen are when she was a mature doctor. So things like that were unique. Mary O'Shea's history was quite a pleasure, folks, because we worked with Abbey League's Heritage Trust, who were honouring her memory as part of 1916. And we took from them a memoir, which was read at our launch, and will also go up on our website. But Mary O'Shea was only a 20-year-old midwife. She had been in the war in England, and she had come home to quiet Dublin, as she thought. And she got actively involved in the Rotunda in helping patients and in dealing with mothers and moving patients away from the windows. So she was quite unique and another person that we didn't expect to have as part of our collaboration. So you have 3 doctors and 2 nurse midwives. The other 2 areas relate to the GPO because the sorting office in the GPO was moved to the Rotunda Rink after the bombardment of the GPO. And you'll see photos in a minute. And that is also quite unique, and we worked with Stephen Ferguson, the historian, in the GPO on that history. The mothers and babies, as I say, just chronicles the living conditions and the conditions, the ordinary illnesses that killed mothers and babies in 1916. And the squalor in the tenements, and the real need for a hospital service where women could safely deliver their babies. So this is the whole environment in which the exhibition took place. Sorry, that was them clockwise there. Albina up on the side, Kathleen, Dorothy, Mary O'Shea here in the corner, and Dorothy Stopford-Price, as I say. And these are the photographs from the relocation of the rink, the sorting after the bombardment, and how quickly, what a work ethic to get set up that fast again, because economy and getting the city moving again was quite important. So they're quite unique pieces. Word of warning also, all of these things to require permissions, be ready to work with them. The materials that we borrowed from the National Library and from other collections all required extensive paperwork. And that's something I wasn't prepared for, and something you have to do. In order to borrow Dorothy's diaries from the National Library, the environment in which they were going to take place in the Oval Room in the Rotunda, which is our historic area, had to be vetted, had to be walked, we had to have extra security, and all of these things added to the costs of the overall exhibition. So you have to be a little prepared for that. But we had very good lenders, as I say, the National Library, Sinead's own collection, Abbey League Heritage Trust, and then the National Gallery for the Caravaggio connection. I fear I'll be cut off if I go into the Caravaggio, so you can read that for yourselves in the guides. Our launch was on the 6th of March, and Sabina Higgins launched the exhibition formally. Again, a little word of warning. If you have a notoriety of that size and figure, be prepared for all the structures that go with it, the security, etc. It wasn't Michael D. Higgins, but boy, was it near enough. So, in things like that, you have to be prepared to accept their protocols and to follow them appropriately. So we had increased security, and we had transport and exhibition costs. This is our actress from the gate, a lovely lady who had her baby in the Rotunda and very kindly gave me of her time to do the memoir on the night of the launch. From a marketing point of view, the other things I did were the podcast, Roisin Ingall's podcast, which took place in the Pillar Room at the end of February of that year. Podcast is a learning experience, as are any of the interviews that you would do to radio stations, even the most minor. Be prepared, have your stuff, because you'll be live before you know what hits you. So those things are things that we probably didn't consider. The important thing here is that the exhibition was a success. It ran from the 7th to the 31st of March. It ran entirely on voluntary service. I couldn't consider my own voluntary because of my day's work, but colleagues and friends within the Rotunda gave of their time, and that was invaluable. And that's just a shot of people coming through our doors. We also ran a lecture programme, 3 lectures at lunchtime over the period, and the people here gave their time free too. So that's, people will be good to you, people will liaise, and people will love to get their own messages out there as well. I'm still looking through photographs here, and it looks a bit one-sided because it seems to be more me than the rest of the working group, but they are there, don't worry. And that's our event code. Where we're going from here is we're going to virtualise the exhibition, put it up on the Rotunda website, so I can advise you all when that happens. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.